My name is Adriana. I am 36 years old. This is not a story I ever wanted to tell. But if someone had told me earlier that love can fail not because of lies, but because of silence, maybe everything would have been different. My husband's name was Lucas. We were together for 11 years. Married for 8. Lucas was the kind of man people trusted instantly. Calm voice. Kind eyes. He never raised his tone, never slammed doors. He believed that problems should be handled quietly, with dignity. I loved that about him. I thought it meant stability. For most of our marriage, our life felt steady. Not perfect, but real. We worked, we laughed, we planned trips we never quite took. We talked about children, about the future, about growing old somewhere near the ocean. Then, slowly, almost invisibly, things began to change. It started with late nights. At first, it was once a week. Then twice. Then sometimes he wouldn't come home at all, sending short messages saying he had fallen asleep at work or needed to handle something urgent. I didn't panic. I didn't accuse. I told myself that this was what adulthood looked like: responsibility, pressure, sacrifice. But something inside me felt off. Lucas stopped sharing details. When I asked how his day was, he answered with one word. When his phone buzzed, he turned the screen down. Conversations ended the moment I entered the room. One evening, I asked gently, "Is everything okay with you?" He smiled. A tired, distant smile. "Yes, just busy." Busy became his favorite word. Weeks passed. Then months. The distance between us grew, not through arguments, but through absence. We stopped touching. We stopped laughing. We started living parallel lives in the same house. One night, I woke up around 2 in the morning and realized he wasn't beside me. The bed was cold. I went to the kitchen. Empty. The living room. Empty. His jacket was gone. I sat on the couch until sunrise, staring at the door, imagining 1,000 terrible scenarios. Cheating. A second family. A version of my husband I had never known. When he came back, just after 6, his face looked older. Exhausted. Haunted. "Where were you?" I asked. He hesitated. "Helping someone," he said. That answer followed me for days. Helping who? Why in secret? Why at the cost of us? The doubts ate at me slowly. Quietly. Relentlessly. One afternoon, while doing laundry, I found something in his coat pocket. A folded piece of paper. It was a medical report. A child's name. A diagnosis. A hospital stamp. The name wasn't Lucas's. It wasn't mine. It belonged to a woman named Rachel. My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down on the floor. That night, when Lucas came home, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I placed the paper on the table between us. "What is this?" I asked. He looked at it. Closed his eyes. Took a deep breath. "Please," he said quietly. "Not tonight." That was the moment I knew something was terribly wrong. Trust needs air. And we were suffocating. I told him I couldn't live like this anymore. That I felt invisible. That secrets were destroying me. He listened without interrupting. Then he said something that still echoes in my head. "I never wanted to hurt you." He packed a bag that same night and left. The silence after the door closed was unbearable. Days turned into weeks. We spoke rarely. Short messages. Necessary words only. He avoided explanations. I avoided asking. I convinced myself he had chosen someone else. Then, one rainy afternoon, everything shattered. I was leaving work when I saw a woman sitting on the steps of a small clinic. She was holding a boy, maybe 8 years old, wrapped in a blanket. His face was pale, his breathing uneven. Something about them pulled me closer. I recognized the name on her bag. Rachel. Before I could stop myself, I walked up to her. "Do you know Lucas?" I asked. She looked up at me confused, then afraid. "Yes," she said slowly. "Why?" "My name is Adriana," I replied. "I'm his wife." Her face collapsed. She started crying. Not quietly. Not politely. She cried like someone who had been holding pain inside for too long. We sat there for over an hour. She told me everything. Her son had a rare autoimmune disease. Treatments were expensive. Endless. Insurance barely helped. She had already sold her apartment, quit her job, borrowed from everyone she knew. Lucas had been her older brother's closest friend. When her brother died years ago, Lucas promised he would look after her family if they ever needed help. And when her son got sick, Lucas kept that promise. He paid hospital bills. He arranged appointments. He stayed overnight during treatments so Rachel could rest. He did it quietly, without telling anyone, without telling me. Why didn't he tell me? I asked, my voice breaking. Rachel wiped her tears. "He said he didn't want you to carry the weight," she whispered. "He said love should be protection, not pressure." I felt like I couldn't breathe. The man I accused. The man I pushed away. He wasn't betraying me. He was carrying the world on his back alone. I left the clinic in shock and called Lucas immediately. No answer. I called again. And again. Nothing. I drove to his apartment. Empty. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Lucas had collapsed at a bus station. Severe internal bleeding. He had ignored symptoms for weeks. By the time I reached the hospital, he was unconscious. I held his hand and begged him to wake up. He opened his eyes briefly and smiled. "You found out," he whispered. "Yes," I cried. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to lose you," he said weakly. "And I lost you anyway." He died that night. The doctors said stress, exhaustion, untreated illness. A slow sacrifice that finally took everything. At his funeral, the room was full of people I didn't know. Families. Children. Nurses. Strangers whose lives he had touched quietly, without recognition. That was when I understood the cruel truth. Love doesn't fail because of evil intentions. It fails because people try to be strong alone. Years have passed. I still visit Rachel and her son. He survived. He laughs. He runs. He lives. Sometimes he asks about Lucas. I tell him the truth. That he was a good man. That he loved deeply. That he believed kindness should never be loud. At night, when the world is quiet, I think about what I would say to Lucas if I could. I would tell him that love is not protection through silence. Love is sharing the weight, even when it's heavy. And I would tell him that he was never just my husband. He was my greatest lesson. My back. I screamed. "You lied to me." He tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. "This isn't what you think," he said. I didn't let him finish. I was angry, hurt, blinded by betrayal. That night, I told him to leave the house. He didn't argue. He just looked at me with pain in his eyes and said quietly, "One day you'll understand." I only hope that day comes before it's too late. After that, we stopped speaking. I cried every night, telling myself I didn't need him, but my heart knew the truth. A few days later, after work, I saw a woman standing near a bus stop. She looked tired but kind. She was holding the hand of a small boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And suddenly, I recognized her. Sophie. My chest tightened. I walked toward her without thinking. So you're the one who took my husband? I said bitterly. She looked shocked. Your husband? She asked softly. Daniel, I snapped. I saw your messages. Her eyes filled with tears. Oh, I'm so sorry, she said. You don't understand. She told me her story. Her husband had died in an accident 2 years earlier. Daniel had been his closest friend. After his death, Sophie's son was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The medical bills were impossible. Daniel had been paying for the child's treatment in secret. He didn't want recognition. He didn't want pity. He didn't even want thanks. He sold his car. He skipped meals. He worked extra hours. And he never told me because he didn't want me to feel pressured, guilty, or involved. Sophie showed me everything. Bank transfers, hospital invoices, messages from doctors. I felt sick. My husband wasn't cheating. He was saving a child's life. I ran home and tried to call Daniel again and again. No answer. I begged him in messages to come back. Days passed. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Then one evening, I received a call from the hospital. Mrs. Elena, your husband collapsed on a bus. My heart stopped. When I arrived, he was lying in a hospital bed, pale, weak, barely conscious. I held his hand and cried. I'm so sorry, I whispered. Why didn't you tell me the truth? He smiled faintly. Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, he said. Not for what I sacrifice. That night, Daniel passed away from internal complications. The man I accused. The man I pushed away. The man who gave everything to help others. Years have passed. I still visit Sophie and her son. He is healthy now. He calls me Aunt Elena. Sometimes, when I look at the sky, I think of Daniel. I once thought he was just my husband. Now I know the truth. He was my greatest love and the best man I ever knew.